I did want to comment. 2 days ago, I listened to Pastor David Berzins. Berzins, I'm not totally certain. He is one of the NIFB, and I think NIFB is done, New Independent Fundamentalist Baptists. It's a movement that Steven Anderson pretty much started and sort of ruled over, a little Pope type thing going on there. But by his own testimony, well, let me just mention, if you're not aware of this, I don't know how you can't be aware of this, but Steven Anderson's 4 adult children that have left the home have all recorded sometimes multi-hour video interviews accusing him of being abusive to his wife being abusive, both of them being abusive to kids, beatings, just all sorts of really ugly, nasty stuff. And Steven Anderson has tried in the past to, has personally attacked me, Jeff Durbin. There's no love lost there in that sense. But when I first started hearing about it, I was like, the anger that he has always demonstrated is not. This isn't overly shocking to me. But I don't want to get in this. One of the children actually contacted me, and I wrote back, and I'm like, nice to hear from you. Yeah, your dad and I have had some battles in the past. Are you talking about some kind of interview or just what? And he went with somebody else pretty quickly, and I don't move overly fast with stuff like that, and I was feeling uncomfortable about it one way or the other. My issues with Steven Anderson have been biblical, historical, factual. I didn't necessarily want to pile on with all the rest of this stuff. And so there's a lot of people separating from Anderson. The NIFB, I think, is pretty much just falling apart. And this David Berzins, he tells the story at the beginning of just, this seems to have been one of Steven Anderson's best friends. Led this guy's wife to the Lord, baptized him. They were in the church for years and years. Anderson helped them plant churches. And of course, these are NIFB, screaming King James only, anti-lordship churches, which are not healthy. They're abusive. But anyway, but he gives his credentials, and they're quite impressive in the sense that this was one of Anderson's closest buds, closest friends, involved in ministry for, I think, 18 years. A lot. And he's making the announcement to their church that they are separating from Pastor Anderson. And I was listening to this, again, while driving, and I just, part of it is we're all still thinking about and processing the Steve Lawson stuff, even though it sure has gotten quiet. I wonder how long it's going to stay quiet. It can't stay quiet. They can't. You can't. Well, they can try. And I have a feeling they're going to try. But that's only going to make it worse. There needs to be a sufficient, not sufficient to answer all the people that want dates, times, and everything else, but sufficient to satisfy biblical mandate, shall we say. Explanations for what actually took place and things like that. So, you think about stuff like that. You think about how difficult things like that are. And I don't want to see, I don't even want to see that going on even amongst churches that I would consider to be extremely imbalanced and downright dangerous, honestly. And so I was just sort of like, ugh. But now that all this stuff is out there, I'm not thinking so much. I did see a clip from, I think, a few days ago, Anderson railing away, and now he's going after this guy and saying, anybody who's telling you to go watch these videos, his kids' videos, they're sinning because they're disrespecting their parents. You're like, okay, look. And he mentions that in one of them, my son called me a bleep bleep. He didn't say bleep bleep, but you knew what he was talking about. Hey, I get it. I was very turned off by the language that was used by a couple of the children. And that saddens me. It saddens me a lot. And that isn't necessary. And that is destructive. And it is sinful, for that matter. But do you really think that pointing out that it's sinful that they use bad language of you is an answer to the actual issue? The actual issue being the accusations that you're not refuting? And that this, like Berzin said, what finally clicked for him was when he listened to what the kids were saying, and he goes, I was there. I saw that. My wife and I saw that. And it all started coming together. But the real thought that crossed my mind was, shouldn't Berzins and all these other guys be sitting back going, have we missed it all along? Have we adopted an absolutely abusive methodology of ministry, preaching and teaching? Is it possible that we're this tiny little group out here that everyone's just like, and that there's a reason for that? And it's not because we are the super godly biblical ones, but because we've got blinders on? I mean, Pastor David, you've got to deal with the reality that you missed this. You said you were close to these people. You were in their home. You missed it. And you might say, well, you always miss Steve Lawson. All I ever, I've said before, Steve and I had dinner once where he picked my brain on John chapter 10 and used me as a sermon, someone to help him with the sermon, without telling me it at that time. And we had dinner a second time at a G3 thing. But even then, even though I was sitting right next to him, we were pretty much talking to different people. And even though we spoke at the same conferences and I would sit, I might be sitting right next to him in the Q&A. As soon as the Q&A was over, he's up and out of there and I'm out talking to folks. And so, yeah, no, I did not have any type of close relationship with Steve Lawson at all. I didn't spend time in his home. If his wife had walked by, I would have known who she was. None of that kind of stuff. So I feel for these guys, and my hope and prayer is that they're going to go, because I appreciate this guy goes, look, I have to do what Scripture says, and we're supposed to separate from people like this. And okay, but consider whether maybe your view of Scripture has been stunted by human traditions and by the fact that fundamentalism is primarily a religion of fear, and that it keeps you from looking at other perspectives. Give some consideration to it. Think about it. I think that's important.